Hey guys, this is Eckhart. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars video. Today we'll be talking about why all ships in Star Wars, and really in a lot of science fiction, always fly with the same orientation, despite the fact that there is no true up or down in space unless you're near a planet or other large body which is exerting a gravitational pull. However, before we get into today's content, I want to give a special thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Vite Ramen. And if you guys have been subscribed to Eckhart for a while, you probably know that Vite Ramen has been the longest and most consistent supporter of the channel, and that's why I've got Blessed Noodle Merchant in my Twitter bio. I mean, I would probably do these plugs for free just because I like the product so much and they send me free ramen, but it also really helps that Vite Ramen doesn't make me say anything, there's no talking points, I just tell you guys that I really like the product, which I do. Vite Ramen is extremely high quality. If you like ramen, you'll like Vite Ramen, and it's also good for you. It's got, for example, a lot less sodium than most ramen brands. Vite Ramen also treats their employees really well, they're always improving the product, and on that note, they've recently released version 2.0 of their flavors, so if you want to check out the patch notes for that, they'll be down in the description. Anyway, if you want to try some high quality, nutritious noodles, you can check out the link down in the description, which will lead you to the very special Vite Ramen Eckhart landing page. There's also some free goodies you can get with your purchase, and if you use code Eckhart you can get 15% off. Anyway, thanks again, let's move on with the video. Alright, so in case you don't understand the question that I'm answering in today's video, just think about it like this. Space takes place in 3 dimensions, and unlike when you're fighting a naval battle on water, there's no reason why a ship has to have a proper right side up or upside down. This is especially true when you're fighting purely in vacuum and there's no sources of gravitational pull. It seems like there's no reason why 2 Star Destroyers next to each other would both have to be oriented in the same way. One could be, again, quote-unquote upside down. It's a sort of meaningless term in this situation, but it just doesn't really happen, at least not very often, and that's despite the fact that in certain situations, there may actually be a benefit to orienting your ship in a different way. This is especially the case with many ships like the Star Destroyer, which have weapons heavily concentrated on the dorsal side. So before anybody says anything, yes, if we're being boring and we want to look at the real world explanation for this, it's simply because it looks better on screen for ships to be fighting in the same orientation. Star Wars essentially recreates naval battles in space, and we're talking about a space fantasy series here, not science fiction. That being said, when I do these videos, what I like to focus on is how authors, the expanded universe, source books, whatever, explain these design choices, because personally I like to see how lore developed and I find that really interesting. So with that being said, let us turn to a very early source of Star Wars expanded universe lore, the Rebel Alliance sourcebook. So the Alliance sourcebook actually has lots of really interesting information about everything in the Star Wars universe and really established a lot of the key concepts of the EU. There's an entire section dedicated to starfighter and capital ship combat, and if we turn to page 54, we actually get a pretty good basic explanation for this phenomenon, which I'll just read now. It is an interesting fact that though space is of course 3-dimensional with a vessel's orientation of no particular importance, humans find it distinctly unsettling to view a ship which appears to be upside down or which appears to be hanging over their vessel. To counteract this, fleets almost always orient their vessels so that their quote-unquote down is in the same direction for all craft. Tradition has it that the approaching vessel orients itself to match the vessel already in position. This psychological quirk makes capital ship combat surprisingly similar to water-based ship combat. It must be noted that if a species were fully comfortable with the 3-dimensional nature of space, they would be at a distinct advantage when fighting humans. I think that is a really good explanation and one that has held from the West End Games era. It's just a fact that many capital ships are piloted by humans, and I would say the majority are piloted by humanoid species, and there are different elements that contribute to this psychological desire for ships to be oriented in the same direction. I think on a basic level, beings who grow up with gravity work better when they establish a down and an up. There's a really good showcasing of this in Ender's Game as the children are trying to learn how to operate in 0G. Basically, it's hard to coordinate or move in a space where there's no up and down, so they set the enemy gate as the down point and they use that to coordinate their maneuvers. So sort of establishing an up and down and a plane of combat probably makes things easier from a psychological point. It helps prevent confusion, especially in like large capital ships, which are very unwieldy already. And I'm sure it's just easier to coordinate when you're working with a group of ships all pointed in the same general direction and facing in the same way. There may also be physiological reasons behind this, from the way the human head is positioned at the top of the body to the way our eyes are placed in a horizontal line, but that's a little bit outside of the scope of today's video. Interestingly, humanoids weren't the only beings who were subject to psychological flaws when it came to space combat. The best example I can think of is how Thrawn used the Marg Sable against Elomins, who, and I quote, because of their psychological profile, simply could not handle the unstructured attack of a properly executed Marg Sable. And that was Thrawn's read on the situation, and he ended up being correct. I could also see Thrawn perhaps using disorienting tactics against other humanoids. He would just have to train his bridge crew, and that is something that he would prepare in advance. The Star Wars Expanded Universe was actually pretty good at making different enemy types fight space combat in different ways. For example, the Killiks will fight differently than the Yuuzhan Vong, who will fight differently than the Empire, and through this we actually see some ships which don't follow this general principle. The best example I can think of this would be the Avathan Thrust ship, which was spherical and had weapons across the entire body. That ship could and would operate just as effectively, quote-unquote, upside down as quote-unquote right side up, and that offers, a bit of confusion for enemy forces, especially humans or other beings who grew up affected by gravity. But even with all that being said, that's not to say Star Wars ships never turned upside down. I mean, technically we even do see it in the movies. In this one scene, the Falcon is flying over a ship, and it's been determined through a long process this is actually the underside of a vessel, which is oriented a different way than the rest of the Imperial fleet. And there are some oddities here. This ship ended up being called a Tector-class Star Destroyer. I can do an entire video on it if you're interested. But still, even within the expanded universe, it was not super common, and that probably has to do with everything I mentioned, and the fact that when a ship is in formation with a fleet, or when it's in combat, it takes a lot of time to flip over without necessarily any distinct advantages. Are there any situations that you can think of though? Are there any upside down ships that I'm missing, or ships meant to attack without a real sense of up or down? Aside from starfighters, I'd guess. Let me know all of that and more down below. Until next time though, guys, this has been your host Eckhart Slaughter. I hope you enjoyed this video. Once again, thank you to Vite Ramen for the sponsor. Until next time, please be safe, guys, and may the Force be with you.